Okay, imagine if every day it was your job to go out there.
I've made it very clear from the beginning that it is totally ridiculous.
Face a room of hungry reporters.
I mean, that is outrageous. It is baseless.
And defend the leader of the free world.
It was very clear that Saddam Hussein was a gathering threat.
Well, for 3 years, that was Scott McClellan's life. So how did he end up there? Well, McClellan is part of a political family. His mom is the former mayor of Austin, Texas, and McClellan was her campaign manager 3 times. Then in 1999, he started working for George Bush when he was still the governor of Texas, then became Bush's traveling press secretary when he ran for president in 2000. Now that's when McClellan's career really took off all the way to Washington. And in 2003, he was named the White House press secretary during a very tumultuous time in American politics. I mean, he had to deal with everything post 9/11, which included the hunt for Osama bin Laden. Then there was the Enron scandal and the war in Iraq, the capture of Saddam Hussein, then the re-election campaign 2004 up against John Kerry, the much-debated story of Terry Schiavo's right to die, and of course, Hurricane Katrina. McClellan was the guy that had to deal with all of it until he was replaced in April of '06.
I can say to Scott, job well done.
Now, on the surface, it seemed like McClellan was loyal to Bush and the Republicans, but it turns out he disagreed with some major decisions made by the Bush government. He was unhappy with the leak of undercover CIA agent Valerie Plame's identity and how the war in Iraq was sold to the American people. So what'd he do? Well, he wrote a memoir about it called What Happened? Inside the Bush White House and Washington's Culture of Deception. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott McClellan. Good to see you, man. Welcome to the show. Great to be here, George. How are you? Doing well. Good. So, obviously, you know, the big conversation around the world is the election. So, I mean, I just have to ask you, Jean Charest or Mario Dumont? How is that?
I'll let the Canadian people decide.
Exactly. What a day.
Great day for America.
What a day.
Great day for America. You know, I think that this will move us forward in a lot of positive ways. Barack Obama has the potential to really change things for the better, and I don't mean that just in the sense of policies. Mm-hmm. I mean that in the sense of our politics. He talked a lot about a post-partisan world where he would govern in a way that transcends the ideological extremes of left and right. He'll also move us forward in race relations, I think, in America, as well as kind of close that generational gap. Yeah, there's still certainly plenty of racial issues underlying everything there, and I think he can move us one step closer to that day that Martin Luther King said, where people will be judged by the content of the character instead of the color of their skin.
You said an interesting word there, and I think it's the right word. You said potential. And a lot of the things that Barack Obama has said he will do, certainly it was quite a speech last night after he was announced as the president-elect. But nothing he said was really new, and that lots of presidents have said that. To get things done, though, it's a far different thing.
Absolutely.
How does he then go about doing it? Is it realistic? Well, you watched his speech last night. Did you sit there and go, buddy, I've been there. Trust me, it ain't that easy.
No, absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of, you look out at that celebration last night in Chicago where you have, you know, nearly 250,000 people out there in tears of joy. They have all this hope in this one person. And, you know, one of the things I discovered, I placed a lot of hope in President Bush. He was a strong bipartisan leader in Texas as governor, and someone who bridged the divide between left and right and worked with Democratic leaders to get things done. That's what attracted me to him. And now I see people putting all this great hope in one person. You're setting yourself up to be disappointed to some extent. And I think Barack Obama, though, understands that he has to govern in a pragmatic way, govern in a way that pulls his party a little bit more towards the center of the political spectrum, as opposed to going too far to the left. Because in the long, I still think America is a center-right country, although it's only slightly center-right. I don't think it's
center-right for America. For us, it feels like it's an extremely right country, right?
Well, I think some people around the world have viewed that because of the Bush years, have viewed it that way in some ways.
Hindsight being 20/20, you said you put your hope in George Bush. You know, and I know it's obviously a lot of jokes are made at his expense, and I've done them certainly as well. And
there have been plenty made at my expense.
Yeah, absolutely. Because and hell, we've done it, and we've had to play your press clips because you were the face and the voice of the administration. But hindsight being 20/20, how do you look back on those years you spent? Some of the most tumultuous times in recent history.
Right. It was a disillusioning period. I worked for the president for more than 7 years. I started when he was governor of Texas. And one of the things that disillusioned me was that he didn't fulfill his promise to be a uniter, not a divider, to change the tone in Washington. You know, we've had 2 decades of hyper-partisanship in Washington. Barack Obama last night talked about moving forward beyond the pettiness and partisanship that poisons the political culture in Washington. That's exactly what I wrote about in my book, is that we need to move beyond, we need to change the culture to move beyond the destructiveness where everything's about trying to gain control of power and win the next election. And let's get back to problem solving and getting things done for the people.
When did you know for the first time for real that disillusionment was setting in for you in the White House?
Well, it was really, it began the final 10 months of my time as press secretary. I went out and when I just became press secretary, it was a tumultuous period, as you talked about, a very controversial period. We were just beginning to learn that, well, maybe there aren't any weapons of mass destruction in Iraq after all. And I took over. I remember I looked at my predecessor and I said, you picked a great time to leave. and we were in the middle of this controversy over some pre-war intelligence about uranium in Niger that was used to make the nuclear case against Iraq. And in the process of that, a covert CIA official, Valerie Plame, was outed by administration officials. And I went out and defended some of my senior colleagues, Karl Rove and Scooter Libby, the Vice President's Chief of Staff, and said that these people assured me they were not involved in this in any way.
They lied to you?
Yeah, yes, they did. And I didn't know that at the time. I had unknowingly passed along false information. Then in July 2005, at the beginning of my final 10 months as press secretary, I learned that I had been misled, knowingly misled.
How'd you learn that?
Well, it started coming out in the press. During there was a federal investigation going on by a special prosecutor appointed by the Attorney General that was conducting a criminal investigation to find out, because it's illegal to expose the identity of a CIA official if you have access to that, if you're a government official. And so it was coming out in the press about that time. And I remember I had to go to the podium, and I was pounded by the White House press corps, rightfully so. They were saying, wait a second here, you've got to set the record straight. Did you knowingly do this, or what's the problem here, or what's the reason behind all this? And the White House counsel's office said, we can't talk about it. This is an ongoing legal investigation. We're not going to say a word about it. And that's a tough spot for anybody to be in, particularly the chief spokesman to the president, when you can't defend yourself or set the record straight.
Sure.
And you can only survive for so long in that kind of environment. But more than that, it was just so disillusioning to me. Here I'd looked these 2 individuals in the eye and been directed, in fact, by the president, vice president, to go and exonerate these individuals. And I found out that they had knowingly told me, and when I asked them point blank, were you involved in any way? And they said no.
Do you get to talk to the President of the United States and ask him what happened? Did George Bush ever tell you that he had authorized any of that?
Well, here's the interesting thing. I'll get to part of it in a second. But during the investigation, we went into this bunker mentality. We were told, do not talk to one another about it, only talk to the special prosecutor. Right. So people were hesitant to talk to one another about it because they would have to go hire lawyers and go before the grand jury during the investigation. So there wasn't a lot said. Sometimes the president would bring it up because he had to even hire a lawyer and talk to the special prosecutor himself.
Wasn't Dick Cheney his lawyer? Didn't Dick Cheney just handle everything?
Well, in some ways maybe, but yes, there was a time, and this was the most disillusioning moment for me. In April 2006, this is about 10 months later, 9.5 months later after that first moment. And when Scooter Libby had initially been involved in this, defending the administration, reports were coming out that the vice president authorized him to go and selectively leak classified national security information on pre-war intelligence to fight back against some of the charges against us. And then it came into the press that, well, the president may have told the vice president that Scooter Libby can do this. Now, for 2 or 3 years, I had been out there, the president had been out there saying the selective leaking of classified information is a serious matter and it ought to be pursued to the fullest extent. And now here I'm learning. We're in North Carolina, and the president finished a speech. A reporter yells out to him about a report that came out that morning. Mr. President, were you the one that had authorized Scooter Libby to leak classified information anonymously? And the president walks up on Air Force One. He didn't answer the question. And I walk in to the cabin there at the front of Air Force One, his cabin. He's sitting at his desk. And he's like, hey, Scott, what were they yelling at me? And he's asking if you were the one that authorized the leaking of this information. And the president looked at me and said, yeah, I did. And I was just kind of taken aback. I didn't say much more at that point. I went back to the senior staff area where I sat on Air Force One, and kind of just thought about it for a little bit.
Beer and go, what the? Did you have that moment?
Well, I did have a moment where I said, I can no longer continue to do this. I mean, if I'm going out there and I'm saying one thing and the truth is something else, how can I continue to do this? I mean, my credibility is what a spokesman survives on.
I'm sure you were witness to so many things that would blow people's minds, because it is the White House and it is such a powerful office in the context of the world. And a lot of press secretaries are, and there's always been this code that you don't talk about it afterwards. You decided to put it in a book, and you didn't just put it in a book about your time. You basically, it's kind of like going, look, I'm sorry, a lot of stuff happened here, and here it is. I imagine you struggled with the decision to do it. But why did you write this?
Well, it was a tough process going through this because I think the American people and I think the world needs the truth. And I would hope that it would encourage more administration officials to come forward and give a candid view of what was happening on the inside there, because we can learn from it and make sure that we don't repeat some of the mistakes that this administration made.
Well, it certainly makes people accountable.
Yeah, and that's important. I mean, when you're open with the public, then you're going to have accountability because it's going to be forced on you. We weren't open with the public. We were too secretive. But when I started the process of writing the book, I wanted to know, and this was the main storyline, what happened? How did this popular bipartisan governor of Texas, who had 70% plus approval rating that I went to work for, become one of the most controversial and polarizing presidents in our history?
People call him the worst president ever.
That's where I started from. Yeah, some people do that. We don't know what history is going to judge him 30, 40, 50 years from now. He still clings to this belief that he's going to be vindicated on Iraq, that Iraq someday will be a thriving democracy and change the Middle East, which was his grand ambition in the first place. I don't know. We don't know what it'd be like, but it doesn't change what I wrote in the book. And it was important for people to see what was going on the inside and know a little bit more about what exactly happened.
But does he believe that, or is it rhetoric?
Because he absolutely believes it. I mean, he is sincere. There's nothing he's more sincere about than his passion for advancing what I would call human dignity or promoting freedom.
Right.
Now, he may be misguided in some of the ways he went about it, but it's very sincere. I would sit with him when he'd meet with defectors from North Korea and hear their stories, and he'd lean forward in his seat and talk very strongly about, I can't believe the world is ignoring what's going on in this country, or women that had been freed in Afghanistan, liberated from the Taliban for the first time, and even when he would go and visit wounded soldiers or families of the fallen, very somber moments. There was one time, in fact, I recounted in the book, when the president walks into this room, and there was actually a Hispanic soldier, sergeant, I believe, from Texas, South Texas, and he had his bandage all around his head. The eyes were completely covered. There's his wife and his 7-year-old kid there, and I'm kind of hanging out in the back of the room as I usually would. And the president walks in, and you could see his eyes tearing up. And you don't know if the guy sitting there knew what was going on around him, but he said to the son, he said, "You must be very proud of your father. He's served his country well and sacrificed for his country." And then right before he left, he bends down, whispers into the soldier's ear and goes, "God bless you," kisses him on the top of the head, and then he turns around and walks out. It's the only time I would see the self-doubt on the president's face. For that brief moment, however brief it was, I could see in his eyes this moment of self-doubt.
Well, because you talk about how he believed in what he thought, and there was a real conviction to it. But I mean, to anybody in the outside world, it just appeared like the administration was delusional, and moreover, and worse than delusional, they were just lying to people. And part of the reason that soldier is there in a bandage is because they lied to
him.
Yeah. And a decision that everybody thinks he lied about.
One of the things I explore in the book is, was it just the decision to go into Iraq in the first place that set things off course, that made the wheels come off, or was it something bigger than that? And there are two things. One, you go to the issue of openness and honesty and candor. We were not open and candid with the American people in the lead up to the war, or with the world in the lead up to the war, and that hurt us in the long term. We had bipartisan support going in, but the reason we couldn't continue that bipartisan support and continue to hold some of the coalition together as it started was because we weren't open and candid about. Now, the question is, was it sinister? I can't speak for every individual in the administration, like the vice president or some of the neoconservatives who wanted to encourage the president to go into Iraq. But I don't think people like Colin Powell were sitting in the room, and I know from my experience, when I was sitting in those meetings, certainly didn't happen, saying, how can we go and mislead the people on this?
Hey, they hosed Colin Powell as much as they hosed you.
But it had the same effect. Yeah, it had the same effect.
You mentioned the vice president. I would like to ask you a question.
And certainly in the book, I would say that I point out my own faults. There are plenty of faults I had, and if you're going to put other people under the microscope, you have to put yourself under first.
I almost wondered if this was a confession for you. if there's catharsis in writing this book, so that you could kind of move on?
Well, there is. When I started the process, like I said, I wanted to find out what exactly had gone wrong, why things went off course like they did so badly when we all expected something better. And at first, I think I wanted to put the responsibility everywhere else. But the responsibility rests with the president and with his administration, including me, for what happened. So yeah, it was very liberating in the end. I said the only way I'm going to do this is if I can be completely candid about it and let the chips fall where they may.
Did anybody call you from the administration and say, Scott, don't do this?
No, actually, though, it did get reviewed as it has to for classified information to make sure there's nothing in there that's classified that's being published. And I went and met with the counsel's office and some lawyers at the White House, people that actually came on after I had left the White House. And they were very careful. And they didn't say, we don't want you to write this, but you might want to think about this because you might have to go and testify before Congress. We can't defend you and all this kind of stuff. I didn't change a single word, though.
Really? They were essentially threatening you.
In a veiled way. I mean, it was very subtle.
You know those moments where, and we watched you on television. It's funny you talk about all the stuff that George Bush seemed to be really care about in North Korea and other parts of the world. Why didn't he care about New Orleans? And you were there when that happened, and everybody saw New Orleans disintegrate. And it was almost as if, and I think Dan Rather even had asked this question, was anybody in the White House watching TV?
Yeah.
What happened with New Orleans?
Well, it's an indelible stain on this administration. I mean, first you have, up until that point, things are starting to deteriorate in Iraq. And all of a sudden people are saying, well, this administration has misled us. Now they say, well, they're not competent. They can't even get it right. Look, they can't even take care of things at home. No wonder things aren't going well over in Iraq. And what happened was that we had dealt with a number of hurricanes the year before, 4 major hurricanes in Florida. Okay. But they were very different because you didn't have that bowl structure like you have in New Orleans, where you can have the massive flooding. And so we deluded ourselves into believing that we could handle it just like all these other hurricanes. The supplies and everything were pre-positioned. It's not that the president didn't care. It's just that we thought it would be taken care of just like any other hurricane. When we knew it could be the worst case scenario. And there's so many other things going on. And part of it, we had become hardened to we had been through so much, wars and hurricanes and everything else, that to some extent we had become complacent. And we weren't, in fact, a tape was made so that the president could watch it that Thursday after the hurricane had hit, on that Monday, say, look at how this is playing out to the American people and to the world.
On the Thursday?
That's not till that Thursday, because he really hadn't appreciated just how bad he was being perceived by the public.
When Kanye said George Bush doesn't care about black people, it was a profound moment, right? I remember watching on TV going, holy shit. Does somebody tell the president a pop star has just called you out in a very serious way?
It didn't get a lot of attention, I think, in the White House briefing room. I don't even know if I got asked about it.
From his iPod.
It's not a top thing. Well, no, but when someone says something like that, he does take it personally, and he is offended by it. But at the same time, he knows that's what the political world is like. But he knew about it. I don't remember if I told him about it or if someone else did first, but he was certainly offended that comment was made towards him because he doesn't view himself as that way.
When you left your position, how much of it was your decision, how much of it was their decision?
Well, it was both. And in fact, I recounted in the book. We were going through some change. The president's approval ratings had fallen to the mid-30s. He would welcome that today.
Yeah. I think now, what did we say the other day? Today, the president's approval ratings are lower than herpes in terms of approval ratings, right? But anyway.
I won't respond to that.
Do you have a comment?
I won't respond on that one. But we had a new chief of staff coming in. And he wanted to make some changes. And of course, one of the first places you always look is the communications. Oh, it's not the policies, it's the way we're communicating it to the American people. And so he wanted to make some changes. At the same time, that was when I just learned about the president in terms of the conversation at Air Force One that I talked about earlier. It was shortly after something that I never imagined would happen in the White House, the vice president's hunting accident. And I had to go out there and defend it and try to get information out of the vice president. You can't even do it internally, much less externally.
What a moment. Okay, carry on.
So I was ready to leave. And I was at the point where I was going to say, okay, the 3-year mark is a good time to kind of quietly go away and leave because I can't continue to do this. I went and met with the new chief of staff, as he had said he wanted to get my thoughts on things. And I was going to tell him, I'm only here for a few weeks more. And he said, well, this is one area I want to make a change. And so that's kind of how it played out.
The moment, because you have such an interesting job as a press secretary, the moment you were behind the curtain before you went out and you knew you had to to tell a story? Maybe it could be something as bizarre as Dick Cheney shooting somebody in the face, or something as serious, as a development in Iraq. That moment, do you have an alone moment where you take a deep breath and like, how does one get themselves ready to go out there, especially when you know that it ain't going to be easy?
Yes, like that day I had to go out and respond to the news that I had been misled and that I had misled the press corps and the American people inadvertently. But I knew that I was going to be a human pinata that day, and there was nothing I could do about it. Interestingly, during that time, the White House press corps, the top people in that press corps were the ones that defended me publicly.
Right.
They said he's got a sterling reputation, but he has to be able to set the record straight. But no, I would be in my office. I'd have a pre-briefing with my deputies, maybe talk to some policy people just to get last-minute information, and then they would walk out, and I'd take a couple of minutes for myself, take a deep breath, and all right, here we go. Let's let it roll.
But there was a point where I thought that you must have sat up there at the podium and looked at the press and went, really, is that all you got? This guy, they're easy. Because it appeared that the press did not do their job in America, and especially in the lead up and during the war in Iraq.
Well, and I talk about that in the book. I believe that's the case. It's not. I don't necessarily put it at the White House press corps' doorstep, because they had a big wall that they had to try to get through at the White House, and we weren't sharing much information. But certainly the National Press Corps as a whole didn't do its job and didn't dig deeply and question things. We were in this post 9/11 environment, and everybody was willing to give the president and his team the benefit of the doubt. Even me. I was like, why are we rushing into this internally? I was a deputy at the time, but I said, you know what? These guys did well in Afghanistan in the initial invasion. They know what they're doing. They know what they're talking about. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, just like a lot of Americans did at the time. And we see where things ended up.
Okay, we're dreadfully out of time, so I'm going to rapid fire quickly. Was George Bush really the president, or was Dick Cheney in charge?
No, the president is the one that made the decisions,
Really?
but he did delegate too much to the vice president to let him carry out things the way he saw fit, such as on energy policy and detainee policy.
Did they ever get really close to catching Osama bin Laden?
Even if I knew, I couldn't say, so I'll just leave it at that.
What did George Bush get right?
Well, there are a lot of things that he did. No, interesting. There are a lot of things.
No, but I mean that. I mean that. I think that there's got to be some.
It's a great question, because everything has been overshadowed by Iraq and Katrina and things like that in the economy now. But this president made an unprecedented commitment to the continent of Africa, dramatically increasing funding to fight AIDS and tuberculosis and malaria, something that is far more than any president before him had ever committed to the continent. And so in education reforms in the U.S., historic education reforms.
All right, speaking of commitment and talk about the environment, we're not going to let you off that easy. We're doing 1 million acts of green. What's your act of green?
Appreciate all you're doing on that. My wife and I are adamant about recycling. We also do a lot to conserve energy in simple things, not turning off the lights, turning off the air conditioning and things like that. When we're not there, there's no need to use it, but we're very conscious of that. My wife probably presses me more than even I would do to make sure we're doing that. And one day we buy our own new home, we'll probably do a lot of energy efficiency things in that.
Do you wish you quit earlier, your position?
Yeah, I don't know. You always look back, and I thought about resigning when the news came out that Karl Rove and Scooter Libby, my senior staff colleagues, had misled me. But it wasn't the president at that point that I thought had misled me. I thought he had been misled by them as well, in fact, on that issue. So I didn't. The average tenure of a senior White House staffer is about 2 years because of the intensity, the 24/7 nature of the job. And I think there's a reason for that. When I originally came in, I said, I'm going to leave at the 2-year mark, no longer. But that was right when things were exploding. And I thought that wasn't a good time to abandon the president. Anyway.
Last question. Dick Cheney. Did he scare you when he walked in the hallway? He scares us from across the board.
Only when he had his dark cape on.
Good to see you, man. Scott McClellan, everybody. He's got a book called What Happened Inside the Bush White House in Washington's Culture of Deception. It's great to see you. We'll be right back.